to The Circle. My name is Linda Kaiser, and we are joined by our regular panelists, Mary Beth Lord, Catherine Harris, and Shelley Evans. And we have a special guest, an expert on oils, I should say, and her name is Pushkara Sally Ashford. So Pushkara, you know more than anyone I've ever met about essential oils. And I'm really curious, how did you get to be who you are today? What was your path to become this?
So, let's see, in 1998, I was going to grow herbs, and I had moved across country to New York State. But I ended up in a healing center where they were using essential oils. And I was sitting around with the proprietor and one other person. We were having a casual conversation about, believe it or not, infantile sexual abuse. Gulp. It was a casual conversation, however. And the woman that that owned the place handed me a bottle with an open, and she had me smell it, and I had the immediate experience of something leaving the folds of my unconscious, something that had been lodged there for a very long time, and it went away and never came back. I knew what it was. It was the topic of our conversation, and it hadn't mattered how much meditation I'd done, how much therapy I'd done, and how many modalities I had experienced. It was that moment, that piece of my, that final piece that was lodged in my brain left permanently.
That's amazing.
Right. And that happens in the amygdala. That's the storehouse of our emotions in the limbic region of our brain. Okay, I didn't know from anything, but I looked at the label and I couldn't understand what the label was because it said SARA. I soon learned that that particular oil blend was for sexual and ritual abuse, SARA. So that got my attention.
I guess so. I think that would make the most dramatic effect on me if that had happened to me, and I'm sure it had the same effect on you.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then the next thing that happened there, because this was a community that were already engaged in using the oils, is that somebody graciously offered to put oils on my back, a series of oils called the raindrop technique. And I didn't think much of it then, but in retrospect, I had to realize that within short order, I had a total transformation. I'd had a head-on collision the year before, and a frozen shoulder, and I had a very weak muscle tone. I couldn't lift the logs that we had to take to the fire. That's the way we heated this place. So it was, and I had done so much. I'd done Qigong, I'd done yoga, I'd done more meditation, chiropractic, all of these other things. But within short order, I started gaining my strength back. And this was when I was 58 years old, folks. I mean, I should have been on the downhill side of things, right? But what happened is that regeneration started happening. It was exciting and it was fast. I lost 25 pounds again. I gained my full range of motion back, and I've never lost it since. So the frozen shoulder went away, and I was recreating myself in every moment.
That is totally exciting, Pushkara. I had no idea that that was so dramatic the way that you began. And I do have to tell you right now, if you lost 25 pounds, we're going to talk after the show.
Right. Well, it's a very broad field. I want to say this, that let's start kind of from the beginning, because what are these essential oils?
That's a great idea. Let's start there, because they're not from flowers or leaves. They're from all sorts of things, right?
Yes, all kinds of plant matter. The aromatic component of plant matter that is that's distilled or pressed into an oil, and this is the lifeblood of the plant. This is where all the nutrients and the oxygen make their way through the plant and keep its immune system strong. Okay, and they are so closely aligned to our biochemistry. There is such a wonderful correspondence between the way they work and the way our systems work, that we have this incredible opportunity. They are there for us, and there's several ways that they could express that. I mean, on the highest levels, they have a very, very high frequency, a very keen intelligence, depending on how they're grown, the soil conditions, the climate, the environment, the altitude, and particularly how they're harvested is so important. So those that have learned the art and the science of harvesting, of planting, of harvesting at the right time, of distilling at the right time of day. And I've witnessed all of this. In fact, I've been part of it. I've been in the distiller stomping the sandalwood or stomping the lavender, right? So there's this tremendous and very subtle process, of extracting these oils, and the result then is that we have some magic. If it's done right, there's magic in it.
So go ahead, Shelley.
So with all of that detail, what about the thoughts and the mental and the emotional state of the people working with it? For example, your thoughts while you're in there, of course you're going to be loving the plants, but is that part of it? Is that part of what Gary Young kind of stipulates when he's hiring people for these kind of processes?
You've got it. Because when you say, what can these plants do? You can ask, what do you want them to do?
Wow.
On what level? On what level do you want to greet them? Because these plants don't care. The essential oils don't care. They have such a keen intelligence that they will repair what is perceived as physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual without the middleman. and I like to say that they supply the missing notes of our song. Okay, and those missing notes tend to be incidents from God knows when. I mean, it can be prior life, it can be in the birth process, it can be in our young life. Say you had rheumatic fever. or say you had an incident, an encounter like I described, or anything, somebody telling you not to sing when you're a little kid, whatever, that is lodged in the amygdala and doesn't want to release itself. What you have is an opportunity for the plant in the form of the essential oil to release for you. And I want to give you an example of that. Has anybody forgotten 9/11?
No.
No, and it's coming up.
I was
15 years. Okay. So I was at a training with Gary Young in Spokane right after 9/11, and there was a fireman there New York fireman, who had been there at Ground Zero. And he was on disability and would remain on disability. We worked for 4 days because everybody there was traumatized by 9/11. We worked for 4 days with 2 oils. One of them is called Release. That's a blend. And the other one is Forgiveness.
What are they a blend of?
You mean what are the
Right. When you say a blend, what is it? How many oils and how does one decide?
Well, okay, these are oils that are crafted. These are blends that have been crafted by a master, and that's Gary Young. I would have to look it up because I don't remember specifically what the constituents are.
That's okay.
So Forgiveness. Oh, this is good news. Rose. Is that any surprise?
No.
Melissa. These are all very high vibrational. Helichrysum, incredible healing, great for pain. Angelica, oh my God. Frankincense, sandalwood, lavender. I feel so much reverence for these plants. I'm telling you, bergamot, geranium, jasmine, palmarosa, chamomile, that's Roman chamomile, rosewood, lang lang, and sesame seed oil. Oh my God. Okay, if that isn't an apothecary in and of itself. Now, the thing is that you don't slather these things on you. It's just a little dab will do you. You know, it just takes a drop.
So how much would it cost to rent and spray the world?
Well, that's what this fireman wanted to know, because he said, I want all of the survivors and all of their families and all of the first responders to have these oils.
Wow.
And people started lining up right there. They said, we're coming to New York and we're going to do this. And they started contributing to the supply so that people could have this experience. That's the quality of the plants and the distillation. The end product is such that it really guides and communicates and really urges us, on toward this generosity of heart. These are all generosity of heart oils.
So how old are oils? When did oils begin to be used? Do you know?
Well, they have a very long history. Some say that it was 3,500 years before Christ that that distillation was first recorded in Mesopotamia. So there are certain significant dates between then and now related to awareness of essential oils. For instance, in Egypt, they were found in alabaster containers in the tomb of Tutankhamun, for instance. The Bible has many, many references to essential oils, and there are, as we know from the songs that we sing and the stories that are told around Christmas, that frankincense and myrrh were valued even higher than gold for what they could do. And many people these days will anoint their infant on birth with frankincense. And I made sure that my grandchildren had that experience when they were first born. And, and more comfortably just putting a little dab on their toe of, say, rose and frankincense, if they were in any kind of distress, and they'd just go out like a light. It was, and there was a little child that I took care of before my grandchildren were born. She was a foster child in the process of being adopted by a couple in upstate New York, and she had a lot of fears. And I would place oils on her feet at her nap time, and we would go out and have adventures. We would have these amazing adventures. And it's interesting because when that few months that I was taking care of her was over, her adoptive father said, "Thank you for bringing courage to my daughter."
Wow. So
in terms of, the sort of evolution of my experience, I never expected much more than just my own healing, but I had a vocal condition that kept me from working and from getting a job, but I could go and clean somebody's house or take care of their garden or pick garbage from their back 40. There's a lot of that kind of thing in the Northeast, as you probably know, Linda. And I'd always take my oils and put them on the person's feet, And so it didn't take long before it became, clear that other people wanted them, and then it made it possible for me to make a living. Good news for me. And there seemed to be a little magic there too. For instance, there was a woman who had breast cancer, and her doctor had told her to leave lemon alone because lemon is supposed to be acidic, right? But the lemon essential oil is taken from the zest from the outside skin, and it is not. It's alkaline, as is. Yeah. So she got hold of that lemon bottle and she inhaled it practically. I mean, it was, she was starved for it. And I showed up at somebody else's place and she was pouring a bath, and I dropped some pine in her bath, and she said, "Oh, my grandmother's house. That's what I smelled at my grandmother's house." Yesterday, Mary Beth and I were talking about odors that we remember from childhood, and that's an important thing to know, that all those things are stored in our amygdala, not in our unconscious. We can bring them to mind. And I'd love to have you think about, something that you remember, some scent that you remember. And I can start because I remember my 5th birthday, my mom made a pineapple upside down cake. And we pulled taffy. And I can still evoke the smells of those two things.
Yeah, you're right. I used to always pull taffy with my brother. And I remember that.
Do you remember the smell?
Yeah, I remember the whole thing. It's vivid. And I always remember the smell of chocolate chip cookies. That was my favorite smell.
How about any of the others? Any of the others?
Horses.
I've got one.
What?
Well, this is not one that I have ever thought that I could bring to mind, but in 2012, my sister and I had gone to a house that was once in my father's family in Watertown, New York, and my grandmother had lived there. But it was made into many apartments, and gosh, she probably died in 1960 something, 3 maybe. But when we walked in through the front door, and there's this huge staircase going up to the foyer, or going up to the 2nd floor. And as we walked up there, and old houses have kind of a musty, dusty thing, and I caught just the faintest trace of a fragrance, and I knew it was my grandmother's perfume.
Wow.
And it was 30 years old or 40 years old. But I still recognize that.
Wow.
Smell stays with us, doesn't it?
Yeah. Shelley?
Yes, you know what? For me, I remember the smell of crayons. I must love school. I remember the smell of the prairies and wheat growing, ready for harvest. But the thing that evokes an emotional response, and this is the thing with emotion, with the oils, right, is the emotional release. And even just remembering the smell of that fragrance, whether it's rose or lavender or frankincense, that can bring you closer to that remedy, even if you don't have the oil with you, just remembering it. But the smell of crayons, I don't know what that means, but maybe I just love school.
Mary Beth, you mentioned some things yesterday.
Well, I was mentioning things that my mother had used as natural, I don't know if you would call them natural healing, but they were old remedies. And we were actually looking them up and realizing that they're still used today, but they're used in veterinary instead of so much on people. But as children, we would get swollen glands a lot, and my mother would put a black salve called Iodex on our necks and would wrap it with like a cotton sheet. And by the next morning, swollen glands are gone, you're fine, and off to school you go. But it smelled like tar. It sort of had that smell to it, and I can still smell that. And the other thing that really mentioned crowns, I thought of school. I used to love the smell of the mimeograph papers that they would hand out for your test. And, I can just remember hating the test, but loving to smell the paper, because it just was one of those scents that I really enjoyed. And then the last one, of course, was my parents. Every Christmas, they would work in the kitchen in the evening, and they would make date nut bread and fruitcake. And it was such heavy batter that my father would stand there and just be mixing it by hand for my mom, and then they would put it in the oven. And that is a smell that I don't think I'll ever forget. With it's just that whole thing of the fun Christmas holiday and my parents working together. So those are the scents that I seem to remember from a childhood.
Beautiful. So the smells are not always pleasant, but the interesting thing about the olfactory sense is that it's the most ancient, and it doesn't depend on our cognition. You drive by a dairy farm, get that smell,
Dairy farm.
Yeah.
or fresh mown alfalfa.
That's my favorite smell in the world.
Oh my goodness.
I
Or-
love that.
Or you walk through a rose garden.
Yep.
See, we can all do this. We have a lot of coffee roasters here on where I live, and of course that scent is going to trail down the sidewalk. And what about just passing somebody who's smoking a cigar?
Can't stand that.
Okay, so
I think they stink.
What?
I think cigars stink.
Yeah, right. Me too. But
I think they just.
What I want to say about that is that the amygdala doesn't discriminate between the good and the bad memory. It just is there, right? And the oils have the opportunity to cleanse, remove, and reestablish a different memory.
How did somebody figure this all out? And how did you learn this? What process did you go through to teach this stuff to you?
Well,
and how long did it take? I mean, you really know a lot, but
I think there's no end to what you can learn here. And I mean, it's such a broad field, and I've had really, really good mentors. But let me explain what I learned from my mentor about learning about essential oils, because he had broken his back, was in a wheelchair, and he decided that he was going to either walk or check out. And he would go on these fasts. And he went on a lemon and water fast. No, it was just plain water, just plain lemon. It wasn't, it was not the essential oil, because he didn't know anything about it. But he began to learn about herbal remedies, because the medical field could accommodate him only to a certain point. And then he was pretty much on his own. He had to make his own healing choices. So he began to learn about herbs, and he trained then as an herbalist. His final fast, and this was going to be his deciding one, whether he was going to live or die. Adding lemon to it, he found that he started to get some movement in his legs. And gradually he brought himself back and was able to walk. And then he went to a conference for herbalists. And somebody approached him one night and just said, do you know anything about essential oils? And he said, oh, you mean that tea tree stuff? Well, she caught his skepticism. But she said, well, you do believe in the efficacy of herbs, don't you? And he said, yes. And she said, you know that some herbs are more alive than others. Yes, that's true. There are many times we go to the kitchen, we just throw things out because they've been there too long. So he was getting on. She said, I've got this information. I'd like to hand it to you. It's about 2 inches deep. And I'd like you to read it and get back to me. Well, it was about essential oils. He said he turned the light on at midnight, and he didn't turn it off till 4 a.m. And when he came back to her, he said, I'm on. I'm for this. I can do this. I want this. So this was his introduction. She said, there's a conference in France. Would you like to go? Because France has really been the place. There have been people there who've really cultivated the art of growing and distilling and know the uses and applications of essential oils. And they do it rather aggressively, more so than here. So he said, yeah, but there are two problems. And by this time he was walking, but he said, I don't have any money and I don't speak French. And She said, I speak French, and here's the ticket.
Oh my God.
So he said, those growers and those distillers did not give away any secrets.
Really?
Well, think about it.
I guess so.
The lavender industry,
Yeah.
come on, they don't want to give things away.
Yeah.
Okay, but he said, I had my tape measure, and I, and he's a smart cookie. So he went in and he watched and he listened and he observed, and he's a welder in a farm. I'm getting ahead of the story. He began to make his own distilling process, and he was so proud of himself to get like this much oil out of his first distilling. And his mentors then got interested in him, and they said, well, if you want quality essential oils, you're going to have to grow them. Because there is no such thing on this earth. So he did. He has invested so much in that and brought people in to experience the process in such a way that you begin to catch on sooner or later, okay? I've been in a lot of trainings, but the real training is on the ground.
So what is it like to go to a place like that and be trained?
Well, what it was like for me is that I had a week to commit to it, and it was at the point at which lavender was being both harvested and replanted, and some of us drove the tractors. There was a certain time of day that the lavender had to be harvested from the field, and then it's laid to rest at the distillery until it reaches a certain warmth. It's called the bricks, and that's the measurement of its readiness for distilling. Then we load it into these big cookers, and the steam distillation takes place once the cookers are loaded, and pretty soon you have a yield. It can be, for the amount of plant matter, it's amazing. I mean, I think it takes 5,000 pounds to make like a liter of rose oil.
Oh my goodness.
A little less, yeah, but a little less for other things. And then you watch it come. You watch it come in from the distiller, and it's rising on water. It's floating on water,
So
and then it has
on
to
the
be
lavender,
separated.
do they do the whole plant or just the flower, or how does that work?
In this case, it was the whole plant. Yeah.
And they cut it off.
But in some cases, it's just the flower. So it can be the flower, the stem, the bark. We've done plenty of bark, because the trees are very important. The trees are tremendously important for body strength and alignment. Think about what trees do, and you take that energy in, and take strength from it.
That's a really interesting analogy. I've never looked at it like that, but it makes perfect sense.
Right. Well, I don't know any better education for really becoming attuned to the earth and all of God's creation. I just don't. I mean, I don't think I heard trees singing before I had these years of ingesting and applying essential oils.
Right, because you become them, they become you. It would be a different ability, wouldn't it?
Yeah, think about this. This is, I'm looking right now at an article that Deepak Chopra wrote about if I could only be like my cells, and all I would do is change it if I could only be like the essential oils. And then he names the qualities: communion, keeps in touch with every other cell; awareness, adapts to the moment, from moment to moment; acceptance, the recognition that each is equally important; creativity, being, how about that? Universal cycle of rest and activity; efficiency, the cell efficiency, the and the and the essential oil, and our own efficiency with the least expenditure of energy, and bonding, our innate unity, giving. The primary activity of the cells is giving, even to the point of death, right? And immortality, which means so they reproduce in order to pass their knowledge on. If we could only be like those plants, if we could only recognize our essence as that, then this world would be a rather different place.
I was doing some reading before this, and I read something that said, which quite amazed me, that the Catholic Church viewed bathing as sin. Therefore, high esteem was given to aromatics, and because they kept body odors at bay. And out of that, rather accidentally, they discovered there were antibacterial properties to these oils. And it said that it was believed that the monks continued the healing tradition of the oils and secretly kept herbal medicine alive in the monasteries. And then we went through this period of having folk medicine viewed as witchcraft and burning herbalist at the stake and things like that. And then we had the Renaissance, and that resurrected herbal medicine.
Yes, I was with several of my colleagues, my essential oils colleagues, and I said, I'm so glad that we've been able to meet under better circumstances.
Really, that's for sure.
Because no doubt we all have past life memory of being
right.
burned at the stake or
right.
or persecuted in some way, And there's still a division, but I have to tell you this, that there are dozens of medical centers and hospitals that have now brought essential oils into their integrative and complementary medicine.
And how did they do that?
Dozens. Really? Yes, and what's more, now the universities, the colleges, almost in every state, I looked them up. I see one in Alberta, Colorado. I see them in New Hampshire, or at least in New England and in Pennsylvania. They're everywhere, beginning to introduce, and one of the motivators or one of the inspirations of this came through, of all people, Donna Karan. Donna Karan is a clothing designer.
Right.
But she had to see her husband through to his death.
Right.
And he spent a lot of time in the hospital, and she observed not only that the patients were neglected and that their care was so limited, but that the caregivers were so stressed out that they could not give adequate care, whether we're talking about the doctors and the nurses or the orderlies or. So So she introduced a program called Urban Zen Integrative Therapies. And she contacted my mentor, the essential oils, said, okay, let's see if we can bring aromatherapy and yoga, Reiki, Mary Beth, massage, numerous technologies and methodologies that are really quite hands-on, and see if we can't turn the hospital atmosphere around. And so the hospital nurses and doctors have been trained. It's an ongoing program, and I've got a list that's a mile long of these things, and I looked them up to see how they're doing since, say, 2009 or so, or maybe earlier than that. UCLA Medical Center, Thomas Jefferson Hospital, Sloan Kettering, the Mayo Clinic, Beth Israel. They're all using these essential oils to benefit both their patients and the doctors. How do they use them? Well, they do it in a limited way. They're thinking aromatherapy. They're not thinking taking the oils internally necessarily, but I'll tell you, if you take them onto the skin, they're absorbed by the skin. So one way or another.
Largest organ of absorption that we have.
Yeah, they're going to get in no matter what. Or through diffusion. Diffusion is an excellent way. I had my grandchildren here for a week, and one of them has asthmatic tendencies, and it comes up especially around bedtime. And so I just put the diffuser on and diffuse it through the night, and he sleeps with a very restful sleep and wakes up quite content. Or I'll put them on his feet. If anything comes up, he and I have this understanding. And also, he can be a rascal, and so I say, well, let's bring some smarts into this thing. I'll give you some 3 wise men. It's a blend of blend of frankincense, myrrh, and sandalwood, and he loves that totally. It's like, okay, I don't need to be a jerk.
That's great. That's great. Well, you know what I think I want to do? I want to take a little break. We're going to end this show right here, and we're going to come back and continue. And I want to delve into the most essential oils for healing, and I want to keep going with this. This is absolutely fascinating, and I think it's so valuable. I feel like I'm being awakened to something that was always there, but somehow got buried. And
this happens every time I get near them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So thank you so much, and we're going to see you again for the next show.
Thank you so much.